loudest in you? What are the loudest two thoughts, feelings, or sensations that are here? What are the two loudest parts that are here? It might be one of these protectors that we spoke of. It might be a skeptic, like, oh, did I really want to click this button this morning today? Was this the right place to spend time? And Jack's like, yeah, that's it, Sid. Oh, no, he's saying something else.
No, I'm saying stop with that kind of stuff, Sid. Please, I don't need to hear.
uh, what's the part? What are the two loudest parts here? So, oh, my body, my back hurts. Oh, the things that I need to do today. What are the two loudest parts in you? The two loudest voices. And as you hear them, you even get a sense of where you hear those voices or where you feel them. Are they in the head? Are they outside of your head? Is it a contraction in your chest? Is it an agitation? See if you can get a sense of these two, almost a sense of location. And then from here, can you feel the sense of lack or want in them? That there's a want there. Maybe it's a want for relief, for fulfillment, for okayness, for peace. Can we feel that want? And then can you feel that there's a sense of it, you can go out into experience to get it fulfilled? Like, oh, if there's an ache in my back, I can move my body. If there's a sense of discomfort, I can do something, try to get away from that discomfort to make it better. Or if there's a sense of, it might be a want, like, gosh, I'm not making enough money. I need something else for okayness. The sense of going out, or there's a going in to resolve that want. And it might be, oh, if I just breathe, it'll relax. And then I'll get closer to this fulfillment. So we play with that. We might, in this game, we'll call that the progressive path. The sense of if I do something, I will get closer to this beingness. It's like, or the yellow brick road. We're following the yellow brick road to make things better. And then let's be back with these two wants, these two parts. And in your system, how are you able to just step back to fundamental well-being that we know it's always here? Sometimes it's like these parts are like the weather that come and go, and behind it is always the sky, which is the peace, the love, the okayness, the flow, the ease that Jeffrey calls fundamental well-being. Are you able to just and invite us? Sometimes they do that inquiry. Who is it that's feeling this? Who am I? Byron Katie's, it might be like, is it true? And Jeffrey's, it might be a sinking in. What is it? How does it work in your system? They call this the direct path. How do you go from the thoughts, feelings, and sensations just to drop in or back into the beingness? Or is it a zooming out? We zoom out and here I am. How do you get back to just the I am? And perhaps for some of us, it doesn't, this is a silly question because there's only the I am. But for most of us, there's a sense of a foreground and background, some kind of discernment. How does that happen in you? And just join me in that. Let's step back to this beingness and let's let it have us. Perhaps it's a sinking in where there's just a loving indifference towards the weather, towards the parts. I am. I am this peace. I am this love. I am this openness. I am this connectedness. I am this causeless okayness. I am stillness. I am equanimity. I am peace. As we abide here, as we abide here, can we once again include the weather? Is your system able to rest here and also be aware of whatever parts are here, whatever thoughts are here? How does it do that? What's that like? We often find that images or metaphors can be helpful, like a sense of a hot tub, that as we rest as beingness, that everything that arises is just soaking in you, soaking in this peace, like an infinite hot tub. Sometimes play with the sense of Rumi's Guest House, the poem. This being human is like a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, welcome and entertain them all. You, as this fundamental well being, as this peace, can you be the space of welcoming the guests? You are the host of the guest house. You are this beingness. You are the house itself. What do you notice? Can you notice the parts that come, the thoughts, feelings, and sensations like they're guests in your house? And does something get pulled up into them? Does it start to blend? And when that happens, can you just sink back in to be the space and also be aware of the guests? Once you find that, can you find that what you are as this openness, as this welcoming is an openness, is a yes, and it truly is a welcoming that requires no doing. It's an effortless welcoming. Like you are the space of welcoming. There is no resistance in this beingness. And can these parts, can your thoughts, can the sense of I want, I need, I don't want, those parts, those guests, can they feel this, that there's welcoming here, that they're being welcomed just the way they are, that there's acceptance here? And just to notice, what are your loudest guests right now? What are your 2 or 3 loudest guests? Can you find a sense of a location, like where they are? And can they feel this sense of welcoming? And what's that like for them? Is it like being held? Is it like being seen? Is it like accepted, care, touch, presence? And is there anything at all you have to do for this to be here? This well-being, this okayness, this peace. If there's a sense of a helper part, then just notice that part, but notice it's just here. This welcoming is just here. Perhaps it's just your nature. If everybody's got that, we're going to make it even more fun. And this is a contribution of Jack, and you can blame him for making this more complicated. So as we welcome everything, everyone, Jack has pointed out that in his guest house, there's a basement. You can find that there's a basement in yours as well. But as it's part of the guest house, everything is being welcomed, and this basement is being welcomed as well. And in the basement are these aspects of us that just aren't ready to come up yet. They're not ready to be seen. Often the vulnerability, the shame, I'm not doing it right, any woundedness from our past that's just not ready to be seen yet. They're in the basement. And we don't get too close to the basement because it can scare parts of us. We just become aware of the basement. And as you're aware of your basement, is there a sense that it can be it is just being welcomed as well from a distance? You are the welcoming, you are the openness, you are the love. And if anything gets a little scared, nervous, tight, just see if you can zoom out a little bit further. See if you can get some more distance from the house, more distance from it. And then let's be aware of the guests that are in the house, that are up on the surface of the house again, as we're aware of them. And if anything has become a little blended, I invite you to sink back in, just sink in to this beingness, to this welcoming, sink in. And then lastly, we're going to go to one last view. As you notice the guests in your house, are they entirely separate from beingness, from fundamental well-being, from self? This that you are, this welcoming, this beingness, this love, is it completely separate from the thoughts, feelings, and sensations from the parts? What do you notice? Where do you find that the parts are also not separate from this? That some of that okayness, that love, that peace is intrinsic in the parts as well. This last view is where the system gets to know the oneness, the bliss of it all, that everything is of this. In your system, glimpse that right now, touch that, feel that. And what's that like? And if you notice that these parts aren't entirely separate from beingness, what about the seat that you're sitting on, the room that you're in, the tree outside your home? Almost done. This is a lot, but just to recap, these are 4 views that we play with here. I added that first one. And these are also, we could also call these the four distinct paths. We started with the progressive path, where there's a sense of I'm going somewhere to get something. And it's just that there'll be more peace, progress, more relief, more fundamental well-being. And we don't really do that path separately in Effortless IFS in what we do in this group, but it's included. And the second path is this direct path, just falling back into self. This is Advaita. This is just this little shift. The direct path. The third path is this Rumi's guest house. This is where a lot of the healing occurs. And sometimes we call it the infinite hot tub, or throwing a birthday party for your parts. And this fourth path that we went to, it's of discovering there is nothing separate from this. They call this the Pathless Path, or Dorothy, you're already home. And can you find that your system might move amongst these 4? Let's come back together, and it'd be great to go around and just hear like how that was for you. What was that for you? Just to notice before we go there. Just how are you? That was a lot. How are you? And just see if you can notice the parts that come up. It's like, wow, that was a little too much going into the basement, or I have an understanding part. I'm trying to make sense of all of this. And then another one, like, wow, that was a great adventure. Like, what are the responses? What's rising in the surface, and what's it all arising in? What's the background? What's the beingness that's here now for you? And as you're resting there, let me just do my 1 minute housekeeping, which is what I'm supposed to share, that I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm a mediator. And this isn't an IFS of psychotherapy. It's friends and colleagues getting together and supporting each other. If everybody's good with that, if I can get a thumbs up from everybody, please. And then and then secondly, is as we're noticing this awareness that's here, the peace, fundamental well-being. The second one is that I always record these, but only my square would ever be shared. Sometimes I make this available for those who can't come, that haven't been here, but only my square. However, your audio could be shared. And if anybody has any reservations about that, just let me know and I make you a co-host and you can click pause. And if there's anything that you've shared prior to this, just let me know and I'll delete it. Or at the end, if you've shared something you're not comfortable with, just let me know and I'll just delete that too. So just stay on at the end and let me know. If everybody's good with that, if I could get a thumbs up, please. All right. How was that? What'd you find? What's going on? Who wants to go first?
I can go first, I think.
Yay, Anton.
So it was interesting, it was not that easy to go into the, to zoom out. But, there was some degree of fundamental well-being and ability to see the different parts and structures and like not to see, to feel them. And also, whenever you were asking to kind of check in with them and to notice them and to see how they react, it was interesting because some of them at least were kind of relieved but also tired, because they've been trying to be seen for so long and it's only happened now, something like that, like they've been longing for that. And yeah, some of them, I think, kind of, it was like the space, like infinite space in which the different manifestations were happening and they were present and kind of stable. But then whenever I expose them to this, just boundless awareness today, some of them kind of, receded or kind of half dissolved in a way, kind of lost the completeness and became less prominent, some kind of, so it's like the deeper layers are still there, but the manifestations which are parts, which are, like the ways to manifest that, are not really there anymore. So it's like the deeper motives or the deeper, I don't know, it's very hard to describe actually. And yeah, it feels as a relief in a way. There are still some parts there, more stable, but they're quieter and they're kind of more open. So yeah.
Well, let me
Thank
ask
you for
all
that.
of us. Yes. So as we hear Anton share, what responds in us? Is this, can you find the beingness that just welcomes him? It's like your guest house. It's just like the little lines between our squares. Perhaps what if they just kind of fell away? And your guest house now includes all of us, includes the four of us with you. So when Anton shares these parts that were there, some that are still dense, some that are dense, and some that just kind of lightened, and this this infinite space, this boundless awareness. Can we find that as part of this, maybe this guest house that we share together? His parts are part of our guest in our guest house, and this infinite awareness, this boundless awareness he shares. Can we, like, we don't want to miss the gift of Anton here, of what he's offering us with this boundless awareness that he's sharing. As we feel that in him, do we know that? Or can we even open almost like a key on a piano, tuning in? It's like, whoa, this is another flavor of this fundamental well-being that Anton's showing us. It's boundless awareness. What's most like that in your system? And then what parts arose in this Rumi's guest out that we're sharing? What parts arose in you in response to Anton? Was there like, yes, or that's just like mine, a comparison, or like, oh, I don't know about that. What arose? Then I've got, and then Anton, when you spoke of, there were parts that were feeling some relief. Could we relate to that? Do we have some parts that felt relief, that feel relief as they're being met by beingness? Parts that feel relief, as he described that in his system. And then he also described there were some that have been that are tired, that have been trying for so long to be seen. How does that resonate in your system? Do you have parts that have been, like Jack described some of these that are still just hidden that he doesn't see yet? We relate to that. Some parts that are just, see me, hear me. And then a very interesting place where Anton was describing what was happening to his parts. And he said some of them, as they would be met by the boundless awareness, that they would, a sense of dissolving and disappearing. And do we know that? And maybe that happens in that fourth view, this pathless path where everything is of this. There's a sense of anything, any separation inside of us, any contraction, any want, it just disappears. And then there's another option. This is one of the reasons I love the IFS model for self-realization, because there's this idea is we have the parts that they carry, sometimes they carry burdens of these wants, these lack, these charges, and that the burdens can disappear. That's the healing. The parts just, any contraction, it goes away. But the idea that perhaps another option is that these manifestations of us, these expressions of us that we could call parts, that they still can remain, but just without any charge. And this is, you get to see how this plays in each of us, and maybe your own versions or words for this. Like some people call this guy Jack and I, like Kelly, will call this aliveness and then awake awareness. And the aliveness are the parts without the burdens. And it's just like, hey, yes, I love cake. I like driving a car. I like playing with my family. They all can be here without a burden. These parts of us, this like living in time. So for some of us, I don't know if you have a sense of time and timelessness. It's this fundamental well-being. As we sink into that, there's just timelessness. And then there's a sense of this, that it is in time, the parts that are in time. And I'm just throwing that out because Anton, he opened that whole door for us. Any final thoughts with all of this, Anton?
Well, it's amazing, it's like the feeling of me as a person be just interlinked set of different appearances, like multi-layer structure. And yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, like, yeah.
Give us another line about Anton. So see if we all can find what you're describing, just to invite us all into it. If you'll describe it maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, it feels, like whenever I was talking about the parts partially dissolving, it was like, there is the metaphor of like, as as a let's say dune in the desert. Like a dune is a some kind of underlying motive, like some long standing whatever energy or inclination or trauma. And this dune is actually on this dune there are multiple manifestations of concrete realization of how this can be or how this influences whatever, like the I don't know, like growth of different structures, which becomes part of personality, having own maybe even awareness. And then whenever it dissolves, the dune still stays the background, but it's also kind of eroding because it's also a living thing. If you submerge it into the boundless awareness, it will be slowly going away. Just you'll I have to let it happen. Just kind of why accepting, why not clinging, or why not averse into it. Yeah, that's the one. And overall, if I just zoom out further, it looks like the whole me is consisted of different kind of structures, like the multiple layers interwoven, and somehow on top of that there is a mind and self-awareness.
Question for you and all of us. Can there be an enjoyment of all of that? These different manifestations, the layers, the expressions, the dune, and all the life that's growing in it, and also the clarity that it's all of this. Can there be an enjoyment of these expressions of Anton in the form, these multi-layers? Can it all be like, wow, how about that? It's like all of our parts in the guest house. Like we can be like, oh, all the parts, and then it's all of this. Can it be like a grand celebration of life, of being this? I guess that's my last question for you, Anton. How do you do with that? How does that make sense?
This is definitely, there is amazement already. And of course, there could be a celebration because it's like, whoa. It's like, what?
Yeah.
So cool.
Wow.
It's like so complicated, so interwoven, so kind of, it's mind blowing.
Thank you. Thank you. Mind blowing. So how's this for all of us? What were we, how did that resonate in your system where Anton just took us? How did that resonate for you? And then I just got to shake it all off a lot because that's a lot, right? He just took us to quite a place. And then all of this, because we're just the same time, we're just playing. We're just kind of like kids outside playing together and exploring. There's no place we're going. There's this sense of we already are this beauty, this perfection, this love, this radiant presence. There's no place to go, nothing to do. And then we get to play together. Who wants to go next?
I can go.
Awesome.
So I'll just put a caveat out there that I'm not a familiar, not familiar with IFS. I only got three sessions in last week or two. In fact, I just watched the session 3 from August 31st, the POK session, just yesterday.
With Guthrie. Wonderful. I love his work. Yes.
So I'm just still learning about the terminology and lingo and parts and protectors and exiles and self. And so some of it is new, and there is a part here that finds it overwhelming, like
So,
Anton said.
so how about that, Mike? How about the part that's, wow, there's a lot to understand. There's the whole model, and what if that we just become aware that there's a part that's an understanding part. We all have that's making sense of it.
Yeah.
And then one thing I love about IFS in this group, it's really not an IFS group. It's really just and so you don't even have to use any of that language. What we're really interested in is just what's happening inside of you. And then if it's helpful to say it's a part, great. If not, just ignore all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right. The context of this from a POK perspective is really the spiritual journey, awareness journey, deepening journey, right? And then I've sort of accepted the fact that the other terminology people use around trauma and people's emotions and other things that either stop you or slow you down in the journey exist. And so I'm trying to work on those. And IFS seems to be a very powerful tool based on what I've seen so far. So I do
So,
want to learn.
so question, Mike. Like as you're here today with us, as we explored those different views, what were you say there's kind of emotions and thoughts that can stop or slow down the opening. What do you find to be your two loudest ones like then, or how about right now? What are the two loudest ones for you? Is it this understanding aspect, or what's most loud for you?
Yeah. So just one quick context before I go into that answer. I just had a knee surgery done yesterday. So I am off to work. I'm on my bed. My knee was okay yesterday, but it's hurting a lot today. So the first one that seems loudest is um everything that's around that pain and being sick and being not okay. So I just accepting that fact and saying, look, you just had a knee surgery yesterday. There's a part there that is getting used to it and um feeling not okay, not normal.
Okay. So how about that? Let's highlight that first. This that resists what is. Like I this the need, the body hurting, having to be home from work and in bed. This like I don't like this. I want it to be different. Can we all, as we hear that expression in Mike, just notice, how do we respond to that? Is that welcomed? This resistance that's there in him, that wants his body to be different, wants less pain, perhaps. How are we with Mike? Is that part fully welcome to our joint guest house? And then what's our version of that? What's the loudest resistance to what is that's in each of us right now? What's the voice? It's the loudest resistance to what is. It could be a I want, just a no, I prefer. All right, and then what's the next loudest in your system, Mike?
This one is not accepting help. Um, there's probably some correlation with the provider in here. Um, it feels overwhelmed to be helped so much, to be cared for, to be fed, to be helped walking from one room to the other. And there's humongous gratitude on one hand,
Okay, but
but
let's
on the
let's stop
other hand,
there.
there's
Let's stop with this voice, because this is a big deal, right? This one that's here. This one that is not, it has resistance to accepting help. Use the word overwhelmed. There's resistance
overwhelmed.
to be cared for. There's resistance to being cared for, to being walked around, to being fed. Like
And
where do you hear or feel that one? Let's just see if we can find it. That voice that has resistance to being helped. Where does that
some
show up? Is it
upper
a
part of the
feeling in the
body.
body? Sorry?
Yeah, somewhere in the upper part of the body. It's a feeling, it's a thought. Um, yeah.
Okay, so let's just for all of us, this one might be more subtle. This one that resists a sense of dependence, of being cared for. What's as we hear this in Mike again, how do we respond to it? Is there a welcoming of it? Do we see the innocence of that part, the way it's there to serve him? This that resists, this that maybe wants to be independent. It should be independent. And then what's the version of that in each of our systems? Like, I need to do this myself. Resistance to care and support and dependence. And in your system, how loud is that part? Is it like, oh, I can barely find that. I love just relaxing and being held and being cared for? Or is it pretty loud? Like in the United States, this masculinity, it's really strong. that one. It's like, I need to do it yourself, take care of yourself, like not be dependent. What's that for each of us? And then again, for all of us, as we're playing this Rumi's guest house game, can we sink back in to this that is aware, this okayness for all of us, Mike? And so if you can just, as we can we be aware of our guests? These are just our guests, these parts. Can we sink back into beingness together? Whatever that word for beingness is, and I'm going to ask you that next, Mike. What is that for each of us right now? What's the most prominent flavor of beingness in your system? Like, is it peace? Is it okayness? Is it flow? Is it ease? Is it connectedness? Is it emptiness, stillness? And then from here, can we be aware of our parts? Maybe it's our big guest house that includes all of our parts. It includes Mike's parts. These two parts Mike shared. I'm not okay with what's happening to this body. I want it to be different. And so, Mike, as we do this, can you be aware of that part and the other one as you're seeing the whole house, seeing them together simultaneously? This is a big deal in our game. Not just one part, but to be aware of two or more at the same time. And this one that doesn't want to accept help. See if we can be aware of both of those can be guests in our house. And then where are you aware from? And for all of us, can we feel the difference when we just focus on where our attention is just on one part? Something just kind of, often it blends and we identify with it. If we're aware of two or more, then we're back in this fundamental well-being, aware of what's arising. How's that going for you, Mike?
Yeah, being aware of both of them simultaneously is new, and that's takes some practice to observe that it's not one part at a time, it's both of them here right now.
Awesome. And what are you aware from? What was your loudest flavor of this beingness?
I think this is where POK comes in, the capital S self, right?
Mhm.
And when it's seen from there or experienced from there, one quality that seems very unique is the compassion. And
Is that so there's
um,
compassion. So there's compassion here.
yeah,
And so this compassion, this is a big deal. Is the compassion, is it intrinsic? Is it just here? Or is it like, yeah, is it just here? This compassion. And this is where we have this uppercase compassion and lowercase compassion. It's like parts have this lowercase compassion, which is beautiful. They have this love and care and compassion. And then there is this compassion that we played with as the guest house, this beingness, this love, this welcoming, this okayness, as a flavor of fundamental well-being where there just is love. And just for all of us, can you find the difference between the two? This causeless compassion that is here and this that's more conditional. And then are we able to rest as the space of the compassion, the love, the welcome, and also be aware of these parts? This is my last question for you, Mike, with this. Aware of the one that says, no, I don't like this. I want the body to be different. This stinks. And also the one that I don't really like. I don't want to be dependent. I don't like this. I'm resisting to that. Can we be aware of both of those? And can they both be, this is where the healing occurs. Are they both welcomed? Can they both be welcomed just as they are? Is it okay that they're there? And for all of us, is it okay that these parts are here for Mike, just the way they are? And this is where we get to be careful of falling back into the progressive path. If we have this idea that, well, if I didn't have this resistance, or if I didn't have this wanting something to be different, things would be better. Like, we notice that's just a spiritual achiever, but that can take us back into what they call Maya, right? Of this wanting and progressive path. How you doing, Mike?
yeah. I don't fully understand the Rumi's guest house concept yet, but here's my analysis or my perception of it, which is Rumi's inviting these folks to the guest house, knowing very well they're not all equal. Some's going to be loud, some's going to be quiet, some's going to be drinking a lot of alcohol, somebody's going to want some special food, somebody's messy, somebody's not. But there's just acceptance of that coming in.
Beautiful.
So there's just
Beautiful.
welcoming and being okay with it's my guest house, it's my party, and it's okay for them to be there. And feeling that host type compassion,
Wonderful.
right?
You
Um,
bullseye, bullseye. So what it just I just want to so for all of us, how are we doing with Mike's exquisite description of this Rumi's guest house, of this compassion for all of our guests who have different, hey, I want to get drunk and have fun. I want to do this, like all these different expressions of life that are being welcomed. They're being welcomed in the guest house, in Mike's guest house. Are we able to find this? And then are we able to like include the four of us in it as we see the unique expression of Mike and Jack and Sari and Anton? Can they be included in our guest house too, just the way they are? This is a big deal because this is the acceptance of what is. If we are, and this we call this, even go to the sense of celebrating these different parts that show up in us, and also all of us in this guest house. Mike, let me open it up and just see if there's anything bubbling for others here with what you've shared. Anything bubbling, Jack, Anton, and Sari, in response to this gorgeous view, perspective of Mike's?
It's just you said, that basically there is a part which believes that if we didn't have something or if we had something, it would be better, like a spiritual achiever. It's definitely having place, and yeah, Mike's perspective is a great one because it's like it's a well explained mental representation of the same felt sense. So it's like another great perspective, really. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, makes sense.
Thank you. Anything else on the guest house before we move on?
Yeah,
And then,
for me, yeah, I just thought like how quickly like Mike went from it like just for me anyway, when I'm listening from like being like in that house to all of a sudden it was like Mike was like, oh wow, I can see that whole house. And it was like this, I felt like this relaxation in Mike when he went to that point. Maybe just my interpretation, but that's what I felt inside.
thank you. Mike, any final words before we
yeah.
move on to see what's happening in Jack and Sari?
Would you be okay if I read the poem? Because I've not read it before. Can I read it out loud?
Uh, can you read it out loud? Sure, sure.
It's the guest house poem, Rumi's guest house. So the being human is a guest house. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house, empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for those, no, be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent. because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Just to hear this beautiful vision from Mike. Notice how it can be this third view of effortless IFS, where we just are the guest house, we are the welcoming. And it can be interpreted two different ways: as the third view of the guest house, or as this first view, this first path, the progressive path, that we're doing something to get somewhere. See if you can find that discernment in your system. Well, we're welcoming them more in order to get somewhere, or our nature is this welcoming, which was how Mike was describing it for us, just this welcoming, this celebration where there's nothing to get. It just is this love expressing, this fundamental well-being expressing. This is where we get to rest in fundamental well-being. We get to rest as our nature and welcome everything that arises just effortlessly. In contrast, there's a sense of doing this to get somewhere in order to get more fundamental well-being and more peace. And we can go to either that first view or first path, or the third path. All right. Anything bubbling before we go to Jack or Sari? Who wants to go next?
Hey, sorry, I have to leave now.
Anton,
Thank you.
thank you.
For
This was such a gift. Thank you so much for being with us. Come back anytime. Thank you for your presence.
Thank you. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Who wants to go next?
I can go, Sid.
What's going on, Sari?
Okay, so well, the image that I got was in the house, that there were those parts, and they didn't actually, they thought they were almost like alone, like they were in a room themselves. And then when they were like little kids, and when they came out and they saw that there were like other parts, there was this joy that they weren't alone, that there were these other parts that were there with them in the house. And then when you were doing the meditation later, it was that like this, the self was, there were a couple different things, but one of them earlier in the meditation was the two protector parts. The one that there was the one that was the people pleaser, and the one that wanted to hide. It was like the self was like the adult, and there were like two little kids in my arms. And one was a little younger, one was about 3-ish, and the other one was more like 5-ish. And she was just carrying them. And they were just like two innocent little kids. And she was like, yep, that's okay. That's, that's what we do. And she was just, loving them and accepting them. And then later in the meditation, when I was talking about the house and the little kids that were running around, and they thought they were alone in their own rooms, but then they came out of the rooms and they were just like running around the house and seeing each other. And they were joyful that they saw, oh, there's other parts. There's other parts here with me. I'm not just alone in this room. The self was more like, it ended up being like it was a dollhouse. And the self was like, oh, yeah, this is the dollhouse. And you're all, a part of this house. And there was this sense before that the little ones thought, ooh, I could be a little bit wicked, and maybe I'm going to get like a spanking or something. And when that self was there, it was like, it was okay. There was like, it's okay. You can run around. You can be joyful. You're not going to get a spanking. It's okay. So there were all these kinds of images coming up when you did the meditation.
Wow. the into the two parts, two kids, these loud protectors that can, I'm guessing, can be quite big. These protectors, the people pleaser and the one that wants to hide, and they just become innocent kids in the arms of self. They're being loved and accepted. Do we all feel that? I mean, it's like we hear the words of Sari, but there's such a gift to be able to join her in this, like really feel this love and acceptance that's there as herself, as this welcoming, the sense of parts just being held in her arms as little kids. Like, what's your version of that? Can we find that? Can we go there with her? As our parts is like innocent kids, even our loudest parts as innocent kids that are just being held in the arms of self as love and acceptance. And then I heard the same kind of thing, Sarah, with the sense of starting with the parts that felt alone in the house. And maybe there's a sense in me, like for me, it's almost like a movie. It's like we're zooming in and we're with these kids that are alone in their rooms. And then wait a minute, they discover it's bigger than just their rooms. They're in a house. And in their house, there are all these other parts. And they can go and they can play. They're not alone anymore. They're with this part. They're part of a system. It's almost like one of the things I love is called internal family systems. And it's always interesting that as parts start to recognize that they're not alone, that they're part of a system. It's a big move, what Sari's describing here, as they realize that they're part of a system. And, wow, we can play, there's joy, we can run around the house this way. But then the movie, it went to, and then whatever happened where there was, from being the house, this bigness of the house, then it became the dollhouse. This zooming out, the spaciousness of this awareness, and to be able to see it as a dollhouse. I mean, what a huge move, Sari, to see the system that way, to be able to, and seeing it as a dollhouse. And then something happened. It was like she was describing the parts that had some fear of, oh, if we do something wrong, we might get, We might get a spanking. Right? The parts that I might do something wrong, I got to be careful. I might get a spanking. But then as the space opened, perhaps they could feel more the pervasiveness of self, of beingness, and that something happened with the parts. So you described them as they were able to be more joyful. There was the fear of doing something wrong and getting spanked. They got to just, wow, there was perhaps that acceptance. And I'm not sure, you didn't give a word for it, but something happened where more joy came. That's how I experienced it. And I guess just for all of us, how does this play in your system? What's your version of this? This isn't, if Sari, what I'm going to suggest is she was facilitating all of us as she was describing her system. She was inviting us all to see if we could, this sense of holding our two loudest parts in our hand, and the sense of our guest house. Perhaps it's our collective guest house, even being able to zoom out and seeing it as a dollhouse, having that space. And then what's it like when the parts start to feel the pervasiveness of self? What changes? In her system, it changed from the fear of doing something wrong, getting spanked, to this joy. Tell us more, Sari. How did I do? That was like my interpretation of what you shared.
Yeah, you got it right. And the thing that I missed in there when you said you weren't sure why, it's because the self was able to let the little parts know that they were just innocent. Like they thought that they were like bad little parts, like, oh, there's something wrong with me. Like there's, oh, we're a bad little part. We're going to get in trouble, or we're not sure, like we're doing this, but is this the right thing to do, or is it not the right thing to do? Just in their innocence and just doing what came naturally. They didn't know, was that right? Was that wrong? But with the sense of that self, it was like, yeah, it's okay, because it's all just innocent. It's not coming from a place of trying to be wrong or trying to be bad. Whatever's coming is just coming from this sense of innocence. And when they felt that, it was like this, little parts were like, oh, this relief. Okay, I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just reacting or doing what came naturally, and it wasn't wrong. And when they had that sense of relief that it was just innocent what they were doing, then they could just relax. They didn't need to be like let's say they didn't need to be like they didn't have that fear and they didn't have that judgment of themselves. They just were. They just were.
Oh, how's this playing for all of us? Do we follow this? Could our system follow this? Do we have parts that heard this, that hear this? It's like that exactly what she's describing. I want that. I want to not be stuck in the sense of doing it right, doing it wrong, trying to figure it out, and instead just get out to be seen in innocence, to be seen as innocence. And if you can't follow this as parts, maybe we can just follow this as me, as Sid. I don't want to be seen as innocence, to be welcome just the way I am. And then, like, I wasn't doing anything wrong. Even the right and right, I wasn't doing anything wrong. Self is meeting me in this place. I'm not doing anything wrong. To get that, to be seen as innocence, to be known as innocence. And then they just were, they just are. I want to suggest what Sari just said is like some of our friends on POK who talk about this depth of being, this all these locations and layers and depths. Sari just I think I even like her version better than what she just shared with us of this freedom of the parts of us, of all these aspects of us being seen as innocent, and then knowing themselves as innocence. In the IFS, we call this the updating, as parts of us start to, as they're being held in self, as they're being seen as innocent enough, something starts to shift. This is the updating. This is what tipping point. The parts start to know themselves as innocence, and this is where we start to know ourselves as innocence. And then that, where Sari describes the parts just were. It's just we just are, and this is freedom. What else you got with that, Sari? How am I doing? I don't want us to miss this. I don't want me to miss this. This is this gift that you're giving us.
Yeah, you got it spot on there, Sid. Exactly what was like. You're just mirroring exactly what was here. Yeah, what I was describing. Yeah, thanks. And thank you for
Wow.
the parts feel such gratitude for being able to express and to share and to have this space to do this and to have the space to do this together. Yeah. Thank you. And to everyone who comes.
Isn't it nice? It's like, as you were describing parts that were in their room and like they didn't realize there was the big house and all the other parts. It almost feels like that with what you were just saying. For me, it's like, okay, my system is in a little guest house, but it's like, wait a minute, we've got these other friends to play with. We've got Sari, Jack, and Mike here, and it's like, whoa, wow! It just opens up even more.
Yeah, definitely.
Gosh, anything bubbling for Jack and Mike in response to where Sari just took us?
No, just other than it was really beautiful, exquisite as well. Very different for me to process that in light of what I had said, but beautiful. So thank you, Sari.
Just to give it a moment, like it just not to move too quickly from this, because what Sari shared with us, like if we really letting that in, that possibility. Are there any final thoughts? Anything else, Sari, before we move our way to Jack Land? And in my system, it's really just, it's almost like digesting it, being with what you shared. Again, this shift from those two protector parts, sense of they're being held in love and acceptance, each arm's holding them. And then the sense the move from being in a room by themselves, by ourselves, to like the zooming out to the house, the full house, and then to the dollhouse. And the sense of the acceptance of what's here and seeing the innocence of what's here. And then the parts getting it. What if that's occurring for the four of us, as maybe not as parts, and just as like Sid, Jack, Sari, and Mike, to feel the sense of this self, this welcoming here, as if perhaps we're like in a dollhouse and we're being held by beingness. And this one that just, and then you can see our minds, oh, I need to figure this out. I need to get more fundamental well-being, more peace, more love. I need to heal my system. It's like, oh, the innocence of that, right? The innocence of, as we're trying to have our lives be better and to do it right and to have more of something and less of other things. And then, oh, I might get in trouble. I might get not spanked, whatever your version is of that. I might do something wrong. And then as Sari described, then we start to feel something something seeing us as innocence. We're being seen as innocence. And Mike, Sid, Jack, and Sari, just the way we are, we're being seen as innocence. And in that, we realize, wow, I never did anything wrong. Never did anything wrong. And then the way Sari ended the story, I love the story, that they just were, we just are. All right. And on that note, are you ready? Join me in, maybe like as we look at our friend Jack, like what's going on there? How's this playing? How's life playing for him? What are his parts today? And what's the background? What's the beingness? What's the beingness? What's the flavor in him as we feel into that? You join me in the curiosity. You ready? All right, Jack, tell us.
Yeah, the flavor of beingness is, you said it. It's not needing to do anything, not really knowing that you can't really know, not really needing to know anything because you know it, you can't know it because it's not a thing, right? That's the flavor of beingness. And the yeah, not really anything. That's sort of the beingness. All those a bunch of negatives there, but hey, and it's a my parts would describe it as something I was taught as what people call unobservable compassion, right? Because compassion for me is if I love, which that beingness, that headlessness, that all includes and everything sort of love that comes from that. You need to sort of mix that with seeing suffering. So if that love sees suffering, then compassion can't not arise. If you love someone and you see suffering, that's what compassion is, right? That mixture, right? But if everything's perfectly okay, then there really can't be any compassion, that definition, right? Well, if everything's okay, where's the suffering? Well, there is no suffering, right? So so in the sense you can't really see suffering, that's the unobservable part of it, right? But then then parts know, yeah, but they're suffering. They're telling me they're suffering. I know they're suffering on their side, right? So that sense of I think you said that you called it loving indifference. So I wouldn't quite use the indifference part, but it's loving, knowing that they don't have to suffer, maybe, or that's the suffering is not required, maybe. I don't know. So that came up really strongly. That And that's a feeling for me. I just gave you a bunch of intellectual talking about it, but that's like oh yeah, yeah. It's more of a feeling of, oh, that it, suffering's not required, wow. But me telling you that because you're suffering it's not helpful at all, right? So yeah, that really came up, that feeling of yeah, that love that let my parts have some compassion, right? So that feeling came up really strongly. And then another really strong feeling that came up for me I guess mostly when Mike was talking. And there's another part of me that I'm completely willing to accept, and that's it. Okay, my little 1-year-old grandson, external or part of me, right, may be totally innocent, but he needs a parent watching over him. He wants to kill himself every 5 seconds if he can get away with it. In other words, you got to watch him, right? He needs a playpen. He needs things locked up that he shouldn't get into, and providing a place for him or those innocent parts to be innocent. I'm willing to accept that as a part of the whole deal, right? So, yeah, we'll let you out of your room because you're a little wiser now, and you're not going to hurt yourself when you play as much, So, yes, I sometimes I have trouble with the innocence, but if I think of it that way, I'm like, okay, it's a part. Other parts can interact with it. If it may be innocent, but that doesn't mean you can leave Drano
Yes.
lying around
Yes.
open on the floor for them to crawl into. I mean, it's just like sense, right?
Yes.
So the balance there is what really comes up strongly for me. So
So let me ask you something with both of these. It's funny, they seem both very similar. First, with this, the compassion and the beauty of what I think you're pointing to here is like the both and. Like, and if you hear me speaking about what's happening in my family situation right now, and you can see the perfectly okayness of it. Like you can see that there's nothing wrong. It's just okay. There's just love here, and that's what I'm hearing, Jack, in this almost this absence of compassion, because we see from that place of being, we see the perfection of what is, but then the sweetness of the human level at the same time, where you'll hear, wow, there is suffering here with what's happening with this family. There is some suffering. There is that. And it's just the sweetest thing where compassion is evoked at the same time. It doesn't have to be that he believes it. It can be like, as you said, Sid believes that that there might be some suffering. He's in that experience. And so there can be compassion on the surface, or for your grandson as he falls and hurts his knee. There's like knowing, you can just see the beauty of it, and there's nothing wrong. It's all okay. But then of course there's this, in this human level, the compassion comes. How do you make sense of that? It's a big deal for in this awakening journey. This was always the trouble for Byron Katie when people would ask her these questions, like, how can you say everything's perfect in the midst of war and death and suffering? How are you with making sense of those two, Jack?
yeah, the idea that just naming it as unobservable compassion, just having a name for it helps, right? Um, have to get way too specifically certain types of theories that let me accept what's going on at the level that it's going. In other words, the level of parts, right? A bunch of 3-year-olds getting together. I mean, I'd have to get really specific about how I think about that to sort of,
Yes.
because how it makes sense. And for me, making
Yes.
sense has a lot of sort of theoretical stuff behind it. I'm not sure that's a good idea to go into that right now, but
Because I just want to. What about just like in some people, Annalisa Edelberg says you don't want to get stuck on the mountaintop. You want to bring that and bring it back into form, into time, into life. Or Locke Kelly's, you don't want to just be the screen, as he'll say. You want to be both the awakened awareness and the aliveness, and in time. When your grandson hurts his knee, you want there to be this full granddad who has love and compassion. It's like the both and with your unobservable compassion, like this fullness of beingness, of fundamental well-being and of life.
Is that a question?
Kind of. I'm not sure. I'm just playing with what it's such a rich
Yeah,
edge
yeah.
you're bringing in.
Yeah. But those are the two things that came up when I was listening. Again, I have parts that are very resistant to being cared for, and just letting that go, letting that part. You can do that, but guess what? We're going to be cared for. This last year, in a few months, I've had a lot of people for various reasons caring for me, right? It's a nice thing to be able to fall back on. But yeah, but one of my I mentioned this before, but one of the biggest parts is this pain that I've got in my back, right? It comes and goes, right? And I'm getting two completely different stories about the cause of the pain that I'm trying to hold simultaneously. And the one says, "Oh no, drop the other side. It's completely wrong. If you don't drop the other side, it's not. You'll never get better." And this side says, "Oh no, you've got to. The other side's complete nonsense. Forget about it." And so I'm getting these two different schools of thought, which are completely at odds with each other. So I'm trying to hold them both, and I think I can do. I think I can. I think I can do
And
it.
where
I
are
mean,
you
it's
holding them
holdable.
from? Where are you holding them from? Where are you holding them from? What's the flavor of this that is aware of them?
Yeah. Well, obviously, you know, pure subject awareness can hold them both, right? But then because there's can hold them both. But holding them, and then the parts when together say, yeah, but what are we going to do? Okay, they got this one, they got blah, blah, blah. But the parts sort of appreciating that holding them both is going to help in the long run, even though there may be some short term
Yes.
weirdness about that. Yeah, so I have to hold the parts trying to struggle with. It's like it's holding the parts that are struggling with the fact that they can actually be held.
And is it okay as we're holding these parts, as Sari is
Oh, it's
loving and
tiring. It's
accepting?
tiring. It can be really tiring. I just want to let one of them go and let the other one take over
Okay.
sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can we find that part that finds it tiring? The part that, God, this takes a lot of work. And then can we notice the contrast between that? Mike's nodding. He knows this one. And the contrast between that and the beingness that just welcomes us all. This one that Sarah was describing that holds the two parts in her hands with love and acceptance. That where there's no effort there. There's no tiredness in beingness. Can we find that which becomes tired?
It may very well be that tired part's what's causing the pain. Ooh, yeah. Mm.
And something else was so interesting that you shared for me, the sense of like your grandson, like as we play with the dollhouse and all these innocent parts, that they're still, as they're being loved, that doesn't mean that they're not kind of adult parts that are looking after them, that are caring, that are putting boundaries up. But then the self at the same time only sees innocence of it all and welcomes
And
it all.
and the 1-year-old doesn't even know there's boundaries.
Yeah.
He may try to explore something and, okay, let me try something else. And there was a big boundary there.
Mhm.
keep him from exploring it. You know what I mean? So it doesn't see any of that.
Yes.
So
It's,
this
it
you're
doesn't
talking about
mean,
these different levels on we were talking about the different levels that sort of.
yeah.
And then the other part that came up really strongly for me was the analytical part that said, okay, the first one's a yellow brick road, right? The second one, falling into self, is that like realizing you're in a movie while you're watching The Wizard of Oz? I was trying to come up with something for that one. Then the third one is Oz itself. When you were in Oz itself and everybody's being taken care of and everything's all good, okay, and you get stuff with straw and you get polished up and whatever, and Dorothy gets the solution. She knows how to fix everything in Oz. And then the fourth one is you're already home. Was right. Just click your heels, man. You're already home. Would those be good examples of the parts of the
I,
movie
I,
that, or the movie
I,
itself?
I love that. I love that. Because
I was having trouble with the second one because I thought, well, maybe it's she finds a Tin Man, and then the
well,
other people. No, it's more like, oh, I'm in a movie.
but what I love with that, Jack, is that this is just, we're just playing with it. The
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
thing is how each of us find our own ways of understanding and our own like paths, our own views. Cause for Sari, it might be, she might have it. It might be now from here. There's a dollhouse and then there's this sense of the loving hands of acceptance and love. I mean, from each of us we're hearing, and from Mike's, this grand Rumi's guest house that he did, it's like each of us find our own. As we're getting to, we've only got 2 minutes left. Let me just kind of bring us together with this, and I just want to check in with Mike, just as we hear from some with Jack when he says that there is no suffering from the perspective, from this one place, the top of the mountain perspective. There is no suffering. Everything is perfect. And at the same time, there's this embrace of the beauty. Anyway, even the beauty of suffering. See if we can find that this is an expression of our humanity that gets to be fully included too. I just want to make sure to see if there were any parts that might have come up in reaction to that, Mike, since your name was mentioned in that. See if anything, how you're doing.
No, doing good. Still processing it. I think, like I said about the newness to IFS, I'm still learning and trying to make more sense. There's many layers, like somebody said, right? So no, it all makes sense. I love the different perspective part, and let me process it and make sense and make it my own. But yeah, both
Great.
views, the macro and the micro, are um, both, again, to be applying the analogy, both here at the same time, simultaneously. It just depends on the lens that you put on.
Beautiful. Perfect. Just the fun of this all, the fun of this exploration, the fun of Jack. Like, hey, let me get my names for this. This is Oz. This is just tap your shoes, Dorothy. There you are. You're already home. The play of it, the play of our inner system, the play of all of this. It's so fun. Sari, Jack, any final words? Anything, Sari?
That's a
Anything else?
thank
It's
you.
just
That's a thank you.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yes. Just what fun. And lastly, just as we close, just the wow about each of our systems today, the wow about how life played in us, how this expression of what was going on in us contribute to each other, like what we got from the beautiful sharing of each of us as we explore together. Thank you so much. I had a blast. See you later.